Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master, Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was... Nobody expects the Torque Inquisition.
Hey, welcome everybody to this latest episode, I guess, of the Torque Inquisition. We don't really count these as episodes. These are fun detours outside of our normal podcast, Window on the West, where right now we're going through the Silmarillion. We're through the Quenta Silmarillion there, so if you haven't listened to that, please go check that out in previous episodes. But here, what we like to do is meet with other fans of Tolkien, that are doing things in media that aren't necessarily what, they're interesting, and they're definitely more interesting than me or Michael and Dan, although Michael and Dan aren't here, so anybody is more interesting than them at this point. Anyway, I digress. All right, so who I am here with is the Middle-earth Mixer. Should I use your first real name, Mr. Mixer?
Mixer's, yeah, Mr. Mixer's good.
Mr. Mixer. All right, we're gonna stick with Mr. Mixer. So we're gonna meet him. Mixer's got a popular, I would say, growing, right, Twitter account. Like, clearly it's blown up a lot in the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I want to say thank you so much, Jonathan, for having me on. You guys are fantastic, very well respected within the community. So I appreciate your time this evening.
Yeah, of course. So what we're going to do is we're going to meet you. Before we do that, we will have an extended podcast today, which you can get to by going to theonering.com/patron. It's $4 a month. First month is free, so you can check it out and see if you like it. You can access to our Discord chats, and we've got a shop that we're building, which you can get a discount on, and the extended podcast, which is about 15, 20, 30 minutes longer. It depends on how interesting Mixer is here.
Hopefully enough.
if it's not I got to go to the bathroom, I'm going to leave the bill on the table for you to carry. Then, yeah. All right. So thanks for joining us, and go to thewarning.com/patron to more on it. When we're going to do our confessions from the comfy chair.
Confessions from the comfy chair,
where Mixer gets to answer the same 10 questions everybody has, and we'll see how he handles those. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know any of them. One of them is indeed some thoughts on the Rings of Power, which will be interesting, and then some more personal questions that aren't too invasive, but perhaps illuminating. But you can't hear them here. thewarning.com/patron. All right. So here's what I want to know is, right, you've got your Twitter account. Let's show this here. You've got, so sorry if you're listening on this here. I'm showing it here on YouTube and Rumble that he's got his Twitter account approaching 15,000 followers, which I think is blown up. So you got that, and then you've also got your podcast, which you do episode. It seems like once every couple months right now, but deep dives into Tolkien. In addition to your Rings of Power reviews, and I've really enjoyed it, particularly the last two. I thought the debate of Finrod and Ather, you made it really approachable, because sometimes it's hard to follow exactly what they're doing in there, and you condense it down into a digestible recap of it, and I think you get more from it if you know what they're talking about when you start, almost.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that if I make a podcast like that, like the Atherbeth, that's definitely, it's deep lore. So I find that if my wife can listen to it, and if she can, if she is able to digest what I'm saying, then that's mission accomplished.
Yeah, for sure, man. So then tell me, like, how did you get started into Tolkien? What was your first experience? What brought you into wanting to experience it more?
Yeah, so mine might be a little bit different from yours. I remember I think I was about 9 years old, and I was flipping through the channels at my parents' house, and The Fellowship of the Ring was on TV. And I think The Two Towers had maybe just come out, because I remember there being McDonald's Happy Meals toys of Lord of the Rings, but I had no concept for anything about it. I just remember like people having them at school, and I was like, what is this? I thought it was just something else like Harry Potter, which... which I was not allowed to. How dare you? So I thought it was just another one of those esoteric, magic universes that my mom wouldn't like.
Yeah.
but I was scrolling through the channels and it was on TV. I don't know what program, but I remember they had gotten to Rivendell, and I was like, I'm in love with this. Like my little 9-year-old mind, I was like, this is one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. And I remember feeling sad because I thought the movie was ending when they got to Rivendell. It gets,
that's awesome.
Gets, switch to disc 2. It starts to wind down a little bit.
That's right.
Yeah,
I saw the movie, and my sister-in-law, when they got to Rivendell, she's like, "It's not over yet," and was disappointed. So there's that. But yeah, you were happy, I'm sure, once you realized, wait, they're still moving.
Yeah, they kept going, and once they got to Moria, you're just even more in there, and then the Balrog shows up, and you're like, yo. So that started a very long journey of just me being in love with Lord of the Rings. Growing up, Lord of the Rings and Star Wars were like my favorite things. And being a Christian, I could feel, I don't even think I really had to have anyone tell me that the themes were there. We know it's not allegory, of course, but the themes are there. And I remember feeling that as a child. And I remember making, all my family around, whenever my grandparents or anybody was over, I'm like, we're all watching Lord of the Rings, and I would make everybody sit down and watch it. And another reason why I loved it so much was it was something that I came to, by myself. Mm-hmm. And when you're a kid, I feel like that's really important. When somebody doesn't have to show you something, you just discover something on your own and you become super into it. Yeah. That's where it all started. And then as I grew up, I read all the books, I've consumed all the content, and I love them. And I feel like as I've gotten older, I've grown just ever more in appreciation for it. And I'm very excited to introduce the stories to my daughter, who's on the way.
Oh, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And another reason why I love it so much at this stage of my life is because you start to really, you get married, you have a kid on the way, you start to really consider what you believe and why. And what I love about Tolkien and the message of it all is you can enjoy it if you're not a religious person. I'm a Christian. Tolkien on Fairy Stories, he talks about the metaphor of the smudged window and how when you're looking through something, the beautiful truths of our lives can become mundane, not because it's the fault of the truth, but it's the fault of the person and our corrupted nature. Things that are beautiful, universal truth that can become less. We can become less passionate about it as we're just going through the motions. But fantasy can be that tool that can unsmudge your window, and you look into the beauty of it all again, because it's got those truths in the story that are reflected back to you.
Yeah. We did a whole, I think it was one of our extended podcasts where we talked about C.S. Lewis's review of I think it was Return of the King at the time. It was Two Towers. In any case, but he talks about how what a good fantasy does is it's reflection. I wish I could say it right because I'm never very good in recalling the exact details of all the articles. It's never been my strength. However, his whole idea is that fantasy is it's not a mirror. It's not you're not recreating stuff. You're making life more real by when you experience fantasy, right? It's like what he said. It's I need to bring it up. Anyway, it's like dipping. Do you remember that? Do you remember that?
Yeah. So I know I don't remember it verbatim either, but it's something where he really. C.S. Lewis is a beautiful communicator, but it's something like, in these tales is the truths that are reflected. Like it's something like that. So I know what quote you're referring to.
It's like when you take something that is boring and bland and you dip it in something that is beautiful and amazing, it doesn't make it worse. It makes it more real. It makes it better. You're experiencing life even more fully. It's something to that effect. Anyway, I'm probably butchering it, guys. So all of you guys who are listening and you're like, no, you're an idiot, John, and just move on. Sorry about that. It's in like an episode like 8 or 9 ago. Anyway, all right. So what you're also doing is you're disproving my point that I had 20 years ago when I was watching The Fellowship of the Ring and really disliking it the first time I saw it, because I was a pure purist and I really didn't want to see them change anything in it, which is Peter Jackson's films actually brought people positively into the Lord of the Rings, which is also what Dan, our co-host here on Window on the West, that he also came into Tolkien from Peter Jackson's films. So you saw the Fellowship of the Ring first. Did you then read it and then read it and then watch the Two Towers? Like, what was your? I'm just curious what your process was.
No, I didn't. When I was a kid, I wasn't really a big reader, so I didn't read them till later.
Okay.
Yeah, I was more like just a video game nerd. I wasn't. I wish my parents had encouraged me to read more.
Yeah.
But I didn't get into that until I started to get older. Because you get that appreciation for learning that comes later when you start taking your life seriously. But yeah, I watched the movies first, and I just remember being I was a big nerd for the movies. But funny, I actually saw them out of order because I saw Fellowship first, became immediately obsessed, and then Return of the King, I guess, was coming out that summer. So I begged my grandmother to take me to go see it. And I don't even think I knew. I was 9. I don't even think I knew what order they came in. I just saw that another one was coming out.
So you're like, how did they get over to who's this guy Theoden and Éomer and...
Yeah, exactly. I had no idea what was going on in the beginning, but I loved it just as much because when you're a kid and you see that Peter Jackson's rendition of the Witch King flying around on that thing that looks like a dragon.
Right.
You go nuts. Yeah. And I remember my grandmother was like, had no idea what was going on. But
I can imagine. She's like, I'm here for you, dude. I don't get it, but I'm glad you like it.
Yeah. And then, went out and bought the extended editions and then read the books after that. But I definitely I owe it to PJ's movies. Huh. I know people have a different experience, and I know the movies don't have everything we would like them to have in there. But I certainly can't say that they didn't make me love them because that's how I was introduced.
Well, funny that you mentioned that. Like, so last night, I watched Fellowship of the Ring, the extended edition, with my 4 kids here.
Love that.
The oldest is approaching 13. The youngest is approaching 7. And so it's a 3.5 hour long movie. I won't watch the theatrical editions anymore. You got to watch the extended editions. They're far better. And in our house, it has one big wall, so we can actually kind of create our own movie theater here at home with a projector and all that sort of stuff. And we do popcorn, and we kind of, because movies at theaters generally suck now, so we just watch old movies on as big a screen as we can here. And my son, who's read The Hobbit 3 times, he's tried to read Lord of the Rings twice. He's 12, and he cannot get through the Council of Elrond. Like, he's just like, I'm so bored.
That's funny because that's one of my favorite chapters.
Really? But that is the chapter most people die on. Like, a lot of people like so much exposition here. We're just talking about what happened and who went on, and like there's some history.
It's a big fat lore dump. That's why it is
exactly. So yes, precisely.
It's great.
Yeah. And so, but after this here, he's like, I gotta read the whole thing now. I gotta watch I got to read all the books now and watch the movies. And he had those moments where, when Gandalf died and like I could hear all the kids all go, and then Boromir died. I saw him like go, like kind of like, wipe his eyes covertly so that nobody would really notice. And I'm like, all right. So okay. So I have to amend my dislike of the Fellowship of the Ring. I still don't like nuclear Galadriel. I still don't like how Aragorn is the reluctant king rather than the destined king, and all this sort of that.
I never understood. Obviously the choice to have Galadriel shown as powerful is good, but I never understood the darkness in which it's displayed.
Yeah.
Because I remember I was actually I was watching it with my father-in-law, who is not a Lord of the Rings guy, but he knows I'm super into it, so he'll watch it with me. And I remember him being like, isn't she supposed to be a good person? And I'm like, I don't really know why
we called her Nuclear Galadriel back in the day.
And, I like that. It's fitting.
And even my 2 daughters who are 9 and 11, they were like, is she bad? I don't like it was like, I think she's good, but is she bad? They had no idea, and I still don't like that. However, we'll get into it. But it's nothing what happened to Galadriel in the Rings of Power. So hey.
Yeah.
All right. So I'd agree. So Tolkien, and so you've devoured the stuff. You clearly know your lore, right? Have you gone through all the histories of Middle Earth, which is a tall task for anybody, which I'm still weaving my way through after reading the first few.
Yeah, I haven't gone through all the histories of Middle Earth.
It's daunting. I mean, so many notes and so many things like that.
It is a lot.
Just curious. But all right, so with that, then you started a podcast and you started the Twitter account. Which came first?
So the Twitter account came first, and I actually I used to have that just as my name, just my regular Twitter account. And I used to work in PR and public affairs. So I would use my Twitter account to try and communicate with people to help me with work and stuff like that. So I was pretty active on Twitter before. And then when I got a new job, I really just didn't want my name connected with it anymore. So I switched. And at the same time, I was thinking about doing a podcast. So I switched the title. I came up with it's funny. I was debating between two names because I was thinking about doing a podcast. And one of the titles was All Things Arda and then Middle Earth Mixer. And those were my top two.
I think you picked the better one.
And I think I did too. Yeah. Because I thought I like All Things Arda, but it's a little bit more esoteric. Not everybody's going to get the reference. Yeah. Middle Earth is much more readily available. So I came up with the name, and then I printed it onto the Twitter page. I made my Twitter just a placeholder for Middle Earth Mixer. And then I think it was a couple months later, I did my first episode, which was basically just a really janky review of the trailer that came out. Do you remember for Rings of Power? Yeah, it was like my audio was terrible. Yeah. I was still figuring it all out.
Dude, I think everybody who started podcasts had terrible audio in the beginning. Like you got to jump in with both feet in order to get it right.
It's not even up anymore. It's down because it's just so bad. But and I got a lot of positive feedback. People really seem to enjoy it. Another thing that actually pushed me to do it was I was on a hike one time with one of my friends, and this was, I think it was early 2020, and I was talking about the ring wraiths, how they came into being, where they came from, who they were. I was probably talking about Kamul and where he was probably from. And my friend is another one of those people who loves the lore of things. That's me. Like, I like lore.
Yeah.
And he said, I would listen to you do a podcast on this. And I thought, really? And then I remember I was watching someone who I won't name. There's a lot of people who make great content, and this is not a knock on that person. I just remember I was watching, I think it was like a 25-minute long video, and it was about Tolkien lore. And I was thinking to myself, I'm a pretty normal guy, by normal definition. I like football. I like barbecues. If I'm willing to burn 25 minutes of my life to watch this person do a very scholarly Tolkien video, I bet I could do a fun, loose, kind of just laid back podcast that my friends would be interested in doing, and I could make it funny and entertaining. So that was another thing that kind of snowballed into it. And I did my first episode and people really liked it. Another thing too, with my Twitter, when I was still using my name, I was doing a couple threads, and the first one is my pinned tweet. Actually, that's what kind of started my idea that maybe I could do this and people would listen to me talk. I did that thread on the significance of Gandalf fighting the Balrog. And it was retweeted by a bunch of political people. And I was like, you know what? Maybe people listen to a podcast of me talking about this kind of thing. Because that's my favorite. That's my favorite scene in all the Legendarium.
There's nothing go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that, and Fingolfin versus Morgoth too. I'm a big fan.
Before he's ground into the dirt. No, I mean, and I will say, this is one of those scenes. We were talking about Peter Jackson earlier, that he definitely got right. I mean, when I saw how he portrayed the Balrog, it's shadow and flame, and does it have wings? Does it not have wings? He was able to create a demon of the deep without it being so monstrously wrong. It's not. Remember the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, and everybody looked at him and went like, "Nah, it's not Sonic." People looked at this and went, "Nah, it's a Balrog." And Gandalf.
I don't think it would have properly. I don't think it could properly be portrayed on screen, but I'm definitely a big fan of the idea of a Balrog being much more man-like.
Well,
you know.
and I think this is the one complaint is that it's far too big to be a Balrog. In fact, according to you know, if is it is it Fingolfin? Or no, it's I'm trying to remember. We just read it, right? Who fights the 3 Balrogs at the Nirnaeth? Is it the Nirnaeth Arnoriad?
Oh, it's
yeah.
I think it's
anyway,
Fingon. I think it's Fingon.
Oh, Fingon.
Yeah.
I think it's Fingon. Yeah. He goes there. Yeah, and right, and if he's fighting these 3 guys, I mean, he's a little guy in the midst of them all, but they're actually more like, you know, like lieutenants. Like they're actually more or less people. And then when Glorfindel fights one, right, it's not like he's fighting them on a cliffside essentially before they fall down. Yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, wow. So well, let's keep talking about your Twitter account, because you're not really only doing Lord of the Rings stuff. You're getting a little bit further afield than perhaps I do, just because Twitter's not my everyday kind of jam. But you know, you threw out, you know, you said you're Christian, and you have, I'm sure that influences your daily life in many ways, and one of them is what you post on Twitter. And so I mean, I will say, I don't know, let me see if I can find the tweet that you certainly recently has caught my attention more than any other, which is your posting your photo of, or a photo of, I'm not in the right thread here. So posting the photo of Faramir. Yeah. No, I'll find it, guys. Just I'm gonna shoot the breeze here for a little bit until I find the photo. But we'll get. Oh, there. Here we go. Well, yeah, it's this photo right here at the bottom, right, of Faramir smoking a cigarette. But you do it whenever there's a rather egregiously stupid article that's posted by mainstream media. Is what I guess. No, is that what you'd say?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. Sorry, go ahead.
So here, for instance, right, this Reuters article about the horrible Nashville shooting, right? It was done in a certainly
deceitful.
Yeah. I like that. And then you post this picture of of Faramir smoking a cigarette, and it says, "If this picture of the young captain of Gondor absolutely ripping a heater gets more likes than your article sucks." And so the article has 1,498 likes, and your picture has 9,954 likes. Now the article has 10.6 million views and 1,500 likes. Your tweet has 10,000 or has 141,000 views and 10,000 likes. That's a much higher ratio of positivity than the other one. So anyway, so like what getting to some of this stuff that you're doing, like how did you decide to say, like, I'm not going to hold back on all this other
So I think just I'm a little bit of a political animal by nature. I did politics and policy in college. That was the career that I wanted. And then I quickly realized that I just got very cynical because of some of the things that I experienced along the way, working in the DC area for a political job. So I got out of that. However, it doesn't just leave you. The strong feelings don't just leave. So when I see stuff like that, and especially too, since I used to work in PR and public affairs, so I know the nature of spin, right? It's what I used to do for a living. So when I see things like that, I know who's sitting at the desks, and I know what they're trying to do, and I know what their intention is. So it makes me even more angry. Yeah. And sometimes, if something makes me feel a certain way enough, I'll drop a little image of Faramir smoking a heater.
Or apparently recently you were at Applebee's. Some reason 3 hours ago you posted a picture of a Gondorian guard in armor and says, "There's an Applebee's location somewhere in the American Midwest that has 3 of these guys in the back guarding the coveted Applebee. If you know this." Like, I just want to know. Like, I might think something similar, but I'll be like, I'm never posting that to Twitter.
I don't know. I don't know where the posts come from. They just kind of manifest in my mind.
It's the Twitter gene. You have it.
Yeah. It's but yeah, for those, the whole politics stuff. It's not that I'm trying to do a specific thing. It just it'll come up. Because I'm active on Twitter, and that was my career for a while.
You gotten any pushback on that from any folks?
My wife. But
well, that is a folk to have pushback.
No. Sometimes she just will be like, maybe you should just not get so much negative attention, because we feel the same way about stuff politically, but
Yeah, sure.
you also think about, you're like, man, I don't want this to pop off too much, because
Right,
I
right.
want it to remain a specific thing. I enjoy the community that I'm in. I enjoy the friends that I'm making online. And I really just, I like talking about not just Tolkien, but literary themes in general, and fantasy done right. Fantasy that can help you, in your life, and help you see life more beautifully. That's my main goal. And then the politics is just kind of a side thing that happens to come up when I get boiled.
Right. It's the lining, or I would say silver lining. I don't know. It's the droplets that come up from the big splash of Tolkien in your mind.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so where, like, I don't know, I have an answer to this, but where do you want to go with it? Right. I'll just give you examples, sort of like for me, I want to, so we have our podcast, we do YouTube videos. We have our Discord chats with our patrons, right? For me, it's just about, like, we had 20 years ago, before social media, we had a great community of some pretty dedicated people on our message boards, where we would get tens of thousands of people a day to the site. And it was really a lot of fun. We had moderators and things like that. Right? That was a totally different time. And we're getting back into some of that. And so for me, it is like that, building that community too. And I really do enjoy hosting a podcast with Michael and Dan on a weekly basis. Our conversations are fun, and I learn a lot. And I'm not like the lore guy like you. I'm the language guy. And so I've always loved Tolkien for the language more than anything else. And that's what draws me to him. So, and I've never been very good at, like, my memory about, like, all the specifics of lore and all that. Because when I'm reading it, that's not what I'm thinking about. I'm often looking at the language and how he says things. Like, I just love his line still from Council of Elrond, or the chapter where Frodo is in the Hall of Fire, and Tolkien writes, it was like being in there was like golden mist sighing on the margins of the world. And I was like, oh, like there, it's like you don't know what that means, but it conjures an image where you're like, golden mist sighing on the margins of the world is a literary construction that few people could come up with. And for me, that's it. And so diving more into it with really knowledgeable people like you and like Michael and like Dan and other folks is, for me, like, it's a great benefit. So that's part of it. Where do you want to go with Middle Earth Mixer?
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't really know in the beginning, but now I'm starting to think of new things just because people are interested, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it. I didn't know I was going to,
and that can be reason enough. Reason enough.
So I ultimately like to get a little YouTube thing going on, get some video going, and just see where it goes. I have my main job that I do. I'm going to be a dad soon, so I'm not sure how much time I'm going to have, but I'd definitely like to expand, get some video going. And like I said, just keep enjoying it until I guess maybe I get bored and don't feel like doing it anymore. And
have you gotten bored with Tolkien yet? Have you gotten bored of Tolkien?
No.
I don't think ever you will. You're not the kind of guy who's not going to be like, I'm done with Tolkien. I don't think I
ever will. Yeah, because I think it's the themes that keeps bringing you back. And I feel like there's so many times where I go back and relook at something and see something I didn't see before.
Yeah.
And that's available to everybody who wants to get into Tolkien. And you mentioned the language. That's another thing that's actually drawn me to Tolkien and C.S. Lewis as well. I was a big history guy, still am. Love history. And it's that cross between history and myth that I feel like so few people really appreciate in the way that Tolkien and Lewis appreciated it. And it's like when they say stuff about it, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. It just speaks to me. And Tolkien was a big history guy, particularly where language and history come together and how that disseminates information and storytelling across different people and culture groups, different archetypes. So I find that aspect of the study fascinating as well. There's Lord of the Rings unlocks so many different areas of study that you can appreciate.
Yeah. I mean, people write new books all the time. We interviewed Austin Freeman, who wrote a book called Tolkien Dogmatics, who approaches Tolkien, what was Tolkien's theology on things. And it's not like Tolkien ever discussed anything about theology directly. A couple times in a couple letters he did, but you can learn a lot from what he wrote. And so what he does is he's through this entire book, and he talks about, what would Tolkien's views on, angels and demons be? Well, we have all these different references where he made, and he talked about things. And so you get a whole lot of insight, even from these new authors who come at with a perspective that not to inject themselves into Tolkien, like we see a lot even in the Tolkien Society these days, and to come up with my favorite word, the amatonormative hetero blah 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 of whatever, right? And what is it? I'll just get angry. So you can
I'm
learn.
blocked. I don't see any of their content anymore. I'm blocked.
Just because they didn't want to see your content, or were you
Well, I think when they had,
stridently?
I think when they did the convention, I believe it was it was either
2020, man. 2021.
Yeah, when they had the convention where it was a mess. You know, all of the different talks. It was, you know, you read them and it almost read like satire, but it wasn't. It was a real event that they conducted. I kind of had a couple different exchanges with them and their president, and I'm blocked and I don't see anything anymore.
Right. It's not the end of the world. It's fine. We'll get you back some. No, we won't. Yeah. All right. So, so before we move into our extended section where we're going to ask you our 10 confessions from the comfy chair, I want to talk a little bit about the Rings of Power. Things are going, because one of the things in your most recent podcast that struck me a little bit, which is a positive way of looking at the Rings of Power, you called out something you found really good with what they did with the Rings of Power, which is the hope of looking up, right? I can't remember the word. It was in the Afterbeth, right? So, but that's what the ships look up, rocks look down. I guess that's like the silver lining to that phrase.
Well, it's funny because a lot of people listen to that and they were like, "Looking up, that's so corny," and I feel like a lot of people just don't know that that's actually a line that's taken directly from the Afterbeth.
Okay, but not ships looking up.
No, not ships looking up. I think that was a little bit of they were trying to rope it in somehow, which it could have been better delivered. However, I did appreciate that somebody grabbed that very, niche piece of lore and kind of related it back to the show.
Yeah. So then when you say, and I'm trying to find, I don't know if you've ever seen this here. I'm just going to have to show this here. This is my AI art version of rocks look down and ships look up. When I was having some fun with AI art back in the day.
I like that.
Anyway. All right. So the question for me is what is the balance between criticism and praise of something like the Rings of Power? Because for me, my perspective is let's burn it because I hate it so much because there's so many problems. In the same way that I had probably too much of a negative reaction to Peter Jackson's films, and I can own that now. But to this year, I feel like after
I think it's more appropriate. I think this your reaction to this one is more appropriate.
So do we call that? So for me, I'm I have this relationship with some other folks who are fans of the Rings of Power, or perhaps the more correct description is there a thing that has Middle Earth in it, right? There anything that is in they'll glom on, they love it. It's just another representation, and I can do it, and I can enjoy it, which is to me completely foreign.
I definitely. So here's my opinion on it. I think that the Rings of Power dropped the ball on so many different things. However, if you let go of the lore stuff and you let go of some of the story stuff that doesn't make any sense. I hate so much of what gets produced philosophically, and that's because it's the nature of who I am politically. I tend to analyze things from a very political perspective, and the only thing there was that one, just when they were in Numenor and the guy goes, "The elves are going to take your jobs."
Oh, I know. That was the worst. You're like, no.
I saw that. I was like, that's crazy. No. However, besides that one portion, and I think that was more a device to create some kind of urgency because they have no time. They can't develop the fact that the Numenorians are actually anxious about death. So they have to create other reasons why they might dislike the elves that don't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I think the structure and the planning of the show was kind of wrong from the beginning. You're cramming all of this stuff into different times. The story, it's just not. They're making stuff up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was watching it every week. I was like, well, you know, I mean, can it get any worse? I was like, oh, there's Mithril. Yeah, sure can. Like, oh, so Galadriel's words actually were spoken by Sauron originally in the last episode.
Yeah,
so.
I think the whole thing is a result of the boundaries that they have put themselves in before they even went into the show, and I think that's a shame.
By boundaries, do you mean copyright wise or
copyright stuff? Just all the things that they wanted to portray within the time periods that they wanted to portray them. I think the plan from the beginning was not well executed. However, I will say that I don't want to fully be mean to the show, because there were philosophical points where I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, well, I appreciate that. You know, not everybody does stuff like that. I didn't even think that they were going to talk about Iluvatar at all, but they did end up mentioning it a couple different times. Granted, it was by two evil characters, which I didn't like. I wish a good character had done that. But there were moments like when Galadriel had said it was something. It was like an allusion to Iluvatar. She said, you know, men call luck and destiny. It's just words that they make up to describe things that they don't fully understand. I really appreciated the little kernels in there that I got. But I think that the first season really dropped the ball on the story. The story was right there. It's already a good story. You didn't have to change it at all. Yeah. And they did. And I didn't like it. I didn't like the first season. However, I probably differ from a lot of people in your audience, where I'm still going to watch the second season and hope maybe it looks more like a second age story. But probably not. I don't have high hopes for it, to be honest with you, because it was crazy. I mean,
I feel like I have to go into it still like expecting the worst and hoping for the best and hoping they'll improve on it.
Yeah.
But, and we'll get into this in one of the questions that we ask you about, like what can be done to change things in this cultural media that we have now, right? What can be done? It's like there's nobody there with any passion to it. There's nobody there that really knows Tolkien, and like they've done some research and they know, you know, some of the bright points to hit occasionally, but they don't know how to hit them right. And so it's like they're, instead of shining a real light, it's like they've got a light and they're poking a pencil through paper and these little bits poke out and you're like, well, that's not the whole light, right? That's like,
but there's so much more.
There's so much more behind it, but all you're seeing these little things, and you're like, you don't get it because you're not seeing everything. And it's I'll also watch it because there are plenty of people who are like, I like just watching you guys react to it because your pain is schadenfreude. I actually enjoy, you know. And it's funny because I go back to it and like my kids are like, are you done watching this thing on Thursday night? Because I was up till like 3 a.m, like watching it, editing it, and then posting it. And I was like, I'm so tired.
I was tuning in. I was tuning in for the midnight premieres too.
Yeah, and then so the negativity that I had, I don't know if like if that's part of it is maybe doing it late at night every Thursday night for 8 weeks, however long that was.
I think too is I wanted it to be a success.
We did. Bad. Everybody did. I believe everybody did.
I wanted to love it
absolutely
so bad.
Well, the first image that came out of what we found out was Finrod in front of the two trees. I think everybody was like, that's pretty amazing.
Yes.
You guys really hit that image well.
Yes.
And so they set us up. But then when they started down the path of, remember the super fans and how what was important when they were pushing it was representation über alles.
That video was crazy.
I
remember
nuts.
when that came out, I watched it. I was like, this is not in good hands.
And all they needed to do is go after real fans and say, look, we're really trying to be like, and I created this video recently of like, here's how Warner Brothers, who's going to be making new films too, in some respect in the third age, I believe, is do what Peter Jackson did, which is put Tolkien into the works and don't put yourself into the works. Don't put what you believe are today's important messages into the work. Put Tolkien's messages into the work, because those are the ones that are going to stand up over time. They stood up for now approaching 100 years with The Hobbit and his earlier writings. I mean, Fall of Gondolin was his first one. It was written in, I think, 1916 or 17. And so we're over 100 years on these stories that have stood the test of time.
The Noldor were almost gnomes.
That's right. That's right.
Sometimes I'll be driving like in my car and I'll just think the Noldor were almost gnomes.
And wasn't Sauron like we had the Prince of Cats, Tevildo.
Yeah,
yeah. All this
it was
sort of,
crazy,
it was
but that's
crazy,
what the evolution of a story is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really wanted to like it because I saw it as an opportunity, as an avenue, really, to share my love of the lore, with my loved ones, and to be able to, watch it with my wife or my sisters and be like, that's, oh look, there's the helm of Dorloman in the background,
And now you're like, oh look, how'd they get to Moria in an afternoon walk from Eregion? Okay, sorry. Yeah, my wife, I don't think she watched any of it. She didn't really want to.
My wife actually liked it, which is part of the reason why, I was excited, because
Are you guys okay still?
I love sharing it with my wife, because she was a music major in college, so she had knowledge of the movies just because there was a portion of one of her classes that talked about Howard Shore's score, which is just incredible. So that's kind of what the knowledge she had of it, but I've definitely pushed her into an appreciation, a more deeper appreciation. Certainly not,
that's good.
What I have or you have, but
well, I'm still trying to get her to read Lord of the Rings one day. We'll see.
One day it'll happen.
All right. So I think. Well, no, we have to talk a little bit about what's coming, right, with Warner Brothers and where they're going.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about it because I think this is another thing that offers me a little bit of hope for maybe a season 2 or 3 of Rings of Power will look more like the Second Age.
Yeah.
Because now they're in a place where they have to compete. Now, obviously, it's wishful thinking because so much stuff that comes out now is just garbage. It's the environment that we live in. But you're thinking, well, they have to compete for fans' attention. They have to compete for influencers within the fandom's attention.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll do things that are more in line with what we want to see.
Yeah, I think there is a pullback from messaging over story, meaning that, for I think the last 5 years, we saw that it was more important to put in the message that you want to put into whatever meat it is you're communicating rather than the importance of the story that you're trying to tell. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that. The one I've brought up the last couple episodes is Picard season 3. They actually decided to get rid of a message and just do a good story. I don't know if you're familiar with Star Trek much at all.
Yeah. Well, I haven't. Oh, sorry, I just slammed my hand on the desk.
Sorry.
Yeah, I haven't seen Picard, but yeah.
You can skip seasons 1 and 2. They're absolute disasters, and the second one was entirely about illegal immigration.
Wasn't Stacey Abrams on the show?
She was on Discovery. Yes, she was. Yeah, that was great. When you bring in a failed political candidate into your show to show your political leanings, it really endears yourself to the entire country.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So,
Perfect
but
formula
they brought somebody with passion in to run season 3, and season 3 is actually a good story. It's not the greatest, but it's actually a really well told story, and they bring back the characters that you like, and they tell things that are meaningful. And like you, I'm hoping they do that with whatever they end up coming up with Warner Brothers, and I'm sure they'll try to reach out to Peter Jackson because it's the Midas touch. They want to try and at least have his blessing in some way, I'm guessing, and probably use Weta as much as they can. But what do you think they should do? Where do they go? Because what they do is they have the same thing essentially, except in films, that the Rings of Power has, which is the appendices, right? Nobody has the Silmarillion. Nobody has Beren and Luthien. They are not allowed to do Beren and Luthien.
It's like the precious.
Yes.
They're precious. The precious. They can't have Beren and Luthien, and I don't think they ever will.
Where would you like to see them go with it? There have been rumors about like a young Aragorn or the Rangers of the North or what happens after the ring. Is the story.
I would love to see a movie about the Angmar Wars. That's my big one. Fall of Arnor. I would love to, get some of the Witch King coming in and crushing, Rudar, Cardolan, all those places. That'd be a fun watch.
Weathertop would be in there back in the day, and we could tie in that.
Yeah, exactly. And they might not go that route because it's a little bit too. I feel like it might be too foreign to audiences unless people are like, yeah, we'll do a movie about the Witch King,
They're too afraid not to, right? I'm so annoyed. There are no more new stories. What did they came out? They're going to do a rebooted X-Files now again. I'm like, I'm so done with the things that we've seen, and or what's the term, member berries all the time. Like we're gonna throw everything in there for, like we're gonna bring back Fox Mulder for this one episode in the first season, so that everybody comes in and watches it, so that hopefully we can get more, even though your stories suck, right? You're gonna try and draw us in with these old things that we cared about, but we don't care about your new stuff anymore.
That's the Star Wars problem. I can't even watch any of it anymore. I hear that
I'm done with it.
I hear people like the new Mandalorian. I actually, I will say I really, really liked Andor. And that's because it's its own story. 100%. They don't try, they don't try to teach you anything. They just give you a great story, which I appreciated. But I mean, stuff like that is few and far between. Everything follows a very specific formula.
Yeah.
And people don't want to take any financial risks. And it's funny because these voices are so loud that criticize the stuff that comes out, and they just fall against a brick wall. They just continue. I feel like maybe the message has gotten in slightly, like you said, recently. But I don't think it's resonated enough. And I think that's because people are just willing to consume whatever gets thrown at them.
Enough people. They're happy. Although even, Disney is cutting back on the TV shows and the Marvel TV shows and the Marvel films. They released 8 films last year or something crazy like that in the universe. And people are like, we're kind of done with it too. We don't really care when you just, flood media with the same thing over and over again. Because like you said, it's a formula. And we start, even though people won't go there and say oh, well, this formulaically matches the previous film that I saw. They'll feel it more than they'll understand it. And that's where the malaise comes in and people just stop caring about it. Okay, well, so let me ask you one final question before we jump into our extended podcast, which is, if you could make one story from anything in Tolkien's Legendarium as a great film, I know what mine is, and Dan and Michael disagree with it, but I'm curious and I know I'm putting you on the spot here because that's a lot to pick from. And this is not your final. You can change this in the future if you want to. What do you think that might be? Yeah,
no pressure or anything. There's so much. I think visually, obviously, I'm going to go straight to the Silmarillion. My favorite depiction, or my favorite thing that's happened in the books, has already happened in a movie. So I'm thinking maybe I'm going to have to go.
By that you mean the Balrog and Gandalf?
Yes, the exchange between the Balrog and Gandalf. That's my favorite thing, and that's already been shown in a movie. So I'm going to jump to, I think, my second favorite thing, which is Fingolfin's fight with Morgoth. So maybe you could do a movie about the battles in the Silmarillion and then lead up with that and have that be the climax of the movie. It would end on a sad note, but it's a hopeful note as well, too. It's part of the reason why I like it, because it's great courage against immense improbability. I would also go with the destruction of the trees, because, I mean, who wouldn't want to see, Morgoth and Ungoliant come plowing down that hill and stab into the tree? Yeah. That'd be a great visual.
That's the ongoing problem with the Silmarillion, is there's so much of it is so difficult to put on screen because there's no hope at the end of the singular stories. So my favorite story, because I think it's one of the few stories in the Silmarillion told as a whole, is the Children of Húrin. And
you know what? Now I want to change my answer.
You're not allowed to. No, but Michael and Dan are like, why do you like it so much? I'm like, because there's so much in there that ties from different places in Middle-earth that we've already experienced through the Silmarillion so far. So we've met, Thingol and Melian and Beleg and Mablung and Orodreth, and we got all these characters and all these places that have been established, and we get the story of this one person from his birth essentially to his death. And granted, his death is suicide, as is his sister's, who he married, and all this sort of stuff. But I think it's such a well-told story with so many good scenes in it that if they did this, I don't know. I think people would find this incredibly incredible.
It's the most complete and competent standalone story.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
All of the different points of lore. I love the Children of Húrin, and I don't know why I didn't think of it. I feel like probably because the ending is so sad, and also
because doesn't have your favorite scene, right?
And,
that was the other thing.
And it's tough stuff to grapple with along the way. For sure. It's a controversial story too. So But I think that that's a fantastic choice on your part.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
A very cultured choice.
I mean, how many? I mean, so many of these stories are so great in there, and any of them would have been better than the Rings of Power, because you could have. You don't have to make every story about the destruction of the universe or the destruction of the elves because they don't have mithril. Like, they're not wearing their mithrils that they gave to Bilbo, or that Bilbo gave to Frodo. But they could have told smaller stories and done a really good job with it, and they decided not to. And I think and they didn't have to spend $1 billion to do it. They could have spent 1/10 that and still had an incredibly good story. And their commitment level would have been far less. Their returns might have been a little bit less, but they would have been starting to build out a world people would have really enjoyed.
Yeah,
and
I think Beren and Luthien would obviously be the best one too, because it can end on a positive note, and it's also it's really just an adventure from start to finish.
It is. The leap of Beren. When they can do that, right? When he I can't remember what they call it. The famed leaf of Beren with elves, the lore of men and elves. When he took down Angrod, I can't remember. See, this is again the lore. I don't remember all the different names. In any case, the two sons of Feanor, and after they were chasing him and Luthien, who had Huan? Who was the master of Huan? Now I can't remember.
So that's when Huan comes and flips on Feanor's son and joins them. Yeah, that's
right. Yeah.
Protects them. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So there you go, guys. Everybody, we should do of the Children of Hurin and the Fall of Fingolfin, and we'd have two great stories.
I would have. Who would you have play Thorin?
Oh man. Now you're putting me on the spot. You're not allowed to do that.
Well, I have a very big Twitter joke that I've been engaging with on who I would have play Thorin. So I'm curious to see what yours would be.
Well, now you have to make me think of it as a joke of who would I have play.
No, it doesn't have. It's also half serious.
Well, doesn't it? It has to be in this political Hollywood environment. It has to be somebody who's married their sister, because you can only play what you are these days.
That's true.
In Hollywood.
Yeah.
So, I have no idea. Who do you have? I can't.
So Ryan Gosling as the
as the dancing Turin.
Yeah, as the joke portrayal. That's I've been memeing that lately with a bunch of other people. I think Henry Cavill would be a very serious candidate to also play Thorin. He might be better as Tor, but yeah, would love see Ryan Gosling in that movie. We'll have William Dafoe do the voice of Glaurung.
That's good. Right? Absolutely. Right? Yeah. Oh man. I don't think about Hollywood like I try. Yeah, I'll come back to you on that one day.
Yeah, you can tweet it at me when you figure somebody out.
There you go. All right, well, let's jump into our extended podcast, everybody. That is, only if you deign us worthy of your $4 a month, or your first month is free. Just go to thewarning.com/patron and sign up, or actually you can click the join button down below. I never know. I think YouTube recently moved it down under here, but on YouTube it's $5 a month because YouTube demands more money, and I don't want to give them more from me, or from you. So anyway, they $4 a month, and the first month is free. You don't get that on YouTube. So go to thewarning.com/patron, and we're going to jump into our extended podcast. So we'll those of you who are joining us, we'll see you on the other side.